far side here, is a PhD candidate in English at Texas A&M. He received his master's in English from the University of Texas at Tyler, where his thesis explored kinship and religion in Octavia Butler's Kindred.
Oh, wow.
His research focuses on the intersections of race, religion, and gender among various genres. He is especially interested in how various genres encode gender and heteronormative ideologies across the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. His published article, Rappaccini's Queer Daughter, Heteronormativity in Hawthorne's Rappaccini's Daughter, is available online in the Explicator Journal. Jonas's paper is entitled Robert Graves, The Cold War and the Beat Generation.
Discussing Allen Ginsberg and his works. You may want to step out during my presentation if you're bothered by those things. Also, please note in my paper, when I use the term beats, I mean specifically the beat poets, unless I say otherwise. Okay, and the title of my paper changed slightly to Robert Graves and the Beats, Poets of Unrest. So, gender, as we call it today, was important to the Beats, and it was important to Robert Graves. Though his relationships with real women were sometimes rocky, Graves venerated the divine female. Some of the beat poets, Allen Ginsberg in particular, were sometimes considered disrespectful in their treatment of women. While the beat style may not have been in line with Graves' ideals, as a group they were seeking what Graves termed the return of the goddess, which for this paper will be characterized as connection and examination of the female principle. Graves was a few decades older than most of the beat poets, but during the 50s and 60s, their writings exhibit similar explorations of women as real-world persons and as muses. The Cold War and its often negative valuation of women will serve as context for the Beats' uncompromising prosody, with Allen Ginsberg's Kaddish serving as example. This discussion will be supported using Graves' poetry and writings from the White Goddess, and will expose the Beat poets' exploration of myth, goddess, and female imagery. So, the US Cold War was expressed as a war against communism. However, many Cold War battles were fought around female empowerment. Elaine May notes that, quote, fears of sexual chaos tend to surface during times of crisis and rapid social change, end quote. The early 20th century was rife with social change in the US, such as first wave feminism, suffrage, the Great Migration, the New Woman, World War I, the Great Depression, the Harlem and Chicago Renaissances, World War II, just to name a few. In response to this dynamic society, sexuality became the ground for conservative mores. Sexuality, to put it simply, was dangerous, and society was watching. Women, especially mothers, were frequently targeted as critical points of social weakness. In The White Goddess, Graves notes, quote, it is true that woman has of late become virtual head of the household in most parts of the Western world and holds the purse strings and can take up almost any career or position she pleases, but she is unlikely to repudiate the present system despite its patriarchal framework, end quote. So he was trusted a little bit more in society. Graves had no problem with this reversal of gender power hierarchies. In the US, however, this power shift was intolerable. In the US, quote, only a specific type of heterosexual relationship had become acceptable, namely, one in which women either played a subservient role to men or risked emasculating them, end quote. Thus, wives, mothers, and women in general were the cause of Cold War ills, and normative patriarchy was the cure. Existing outside of gender norms, feminized men and masculinized women were dangers to the body politic, since both were considered susceptible to communist violation and indoctrination. This repressed gynophobic society birthed the Beat generation and its poets. Querying for this article designates any act outside of society's normative boundaries, and the Beat poets willingly queered society and its sexual norms. The term beat, according to John Cleland Home, signified an individual alienated by the authoritarian mores of straight society, who were thus forced up against the immovable wall of their own consciousness. To remain true to themselves and to voice their dissatisfaction, the Beats rebelled, and art, their chosen form of rebellion, cried out for uninhibited expression. In other words, the Beats' aggressive style was equal to and oppositional to the dogma of straight patriarchal society. True art for the Beats expressed the writer's inalienable truth, not social norms. The Beats were at times heterosexually promiscuous, other times aggressively homosocial, and at other times openly homosexual. While many individuals at that generation were criticized for their sexual mores, the Beat poets' aggressive styles gained particular attention. Allen Ginsberg, for example, developed a provoking style that was meant to, and did, garner passionate reactions and outrage. The Beats were aggressive and unapologetic, but they were also enigmatic and contradictory. But so was Robert Graves. Graves defied easy categorization or classification. While not intentionally offensive, Graves' writing was meant to provoke. Graves, like the Beats, was a poet of unrest. Conventional wisdom of the Cold War stated, quote, strong families required two essential ingredients: sexual restraint outside of marriage and traditional gender roles in marriage, end quote. Notably, sex and sexuality were central to both requirements. Graves, the Beats, and many individuals during the Cold Wars did not live up to these two requirements. In Graves' Cry Fa, 1951, his beliefs concerning sexuality closely parallels those of the Beats. Graves writes, lines 4 through 6, Socrates and Plato burked the issue, namely how man and woman love should be, with homosexual ideology. Burked in this context means to murder, possibly by suffocation. Graves' speaker notes that possibly man and woman love was suffocating, but it was undeniably suffocated. In lines 10 through 12, Graves' speaker notes the social impetus towards chastity. Curious, various, immoral, moral. Confess what elegant square or lumpish hamlet lives free from nymphological disquiet. Graves' speaker points out sex and sexuality are everywhere, whether acknowledged or not. The speaker continues noting that the pursuit of sex and pleasure are not empty theories for scientists to ponder, but are instead human realities. Cry Fa ends with a request for the speaker's love to walk with them among the proud remnants of a visionary race, line 21. However, it is unclear if the visionary race expired from lack of sex or from too much. Cold War wardens would argue it was from too much. The Beats might argue there's never too much sex. Graves' Cry Fa ends on a romantic note. The Beats were more aggressive and less romantic, but still in line with Graves' ideals. According to Anne Munich, Graves believed that the muse was elusive and could only be experienced directly during periods of trance, inspiration, or ecstasy. Allen Ginsberg, a Beat, was known to embrace ecstasy as a path to a poetic inspiration, sometimes in public and sometimes during interviews. However, their works exhibit some commonalities. For a representative example, I will look at Allen Ginsberg and his Kaddish. Though sometimes considered misogynistic, Kaddish, written for Ginsberg's mother Naomi, who died in 1956, exhibits a search for connection with the feminine. Graves believed that the poet meets the muse within, quote, the paradise he has built with his own words, end quote. In Kaddish, Ginsberg writes, in the world which he has created according to his will, blessed praise, line 246. This phrase mirrors Graves' idea that a poet is building and creating a world, possibly a paradise. Since Ginsberg, he is the poet, and more specifically, the poet as God. Graves suggests building a paradise. Ginsberg, in his own style, creates reality. Graves believed in women's inherent divinity, and that divinity eventually leads to male jealousy, the White Goddess, 476. This idea of positive becoming negative motion underlies Kaddish, as a lifetime of negative feelings are directed from the speaker toward the mother throughout in a mixing of contemporary moments, personal memories, Jewish mysticism, and Old Testament references. This mix of myth and reality is reminiscent of Graves' style in works such as The Jackal's Address to Iris, Return of the Goddess Artemis, Hercules at Maya, and so on and so on. In Kaddish, Ginsberg produces a truly poetic piece according to Graves' definition, which states, quote, true poetic practice implies a mind so miraculously attuned and illuminated that it can form words by a chain of more than coincidences into a living entity, a poem that goes about on its own, affecting readers with its stored magic, end quote. We can see Ginsberg's power in Canto 4 of Kaddish. Canto 4 almost completely lacks punctuation. In this section, the speaker states, "What have I left out and what have I forgotten?" Lack of punctuation adds potential to these perhaps statements, which are perhaps questions. The phrasing also reveals the speaker is looking for something. They wish to comprehend and memorialize their mother by building a reality around her, or more correctly, around their memories of her. By building a world of words, they seek to understand the real mother, Naomi, and perhaps also the ideal mother. Ginsberg writes, again, please note there is no punctuation in this entire section. "Oh mother, what have I left out? Oh mother, what have I forgotten? Oh mother, farewell, with the long black shoe, farewell, with Communist Party and a broken stocking, farewell, with 6 dark hairs on the wen of your breast, farewell, with your old dress and a long black beard around the vagina, farewell." Ginsberg's speaker eulogizes a real woman with a real body, not a perfect perpetually virgin mother. In this canto, the speaker defines the mother by what her eyes have seen: America, Ma Rainey, Russia, China, the Bronx, an abortion, an appendix operation, a divorce. However, by listing what she has seen, they are in fact listing what they have seen in her eyes. The speaker and mother observe each other throughout the text. The real mother, however, is silent as she vocalizes only what the speaker attributes to her from memory and imagination. This effective reality proves the speaker can only know their mother through their own experience. Though they may try, they are never privy to her reality. They only see the reflection in her eyes. Graves notes, quote, "No muse poet grows conscious of the muse except by experience of a woman in whom the goddess is to some degree resident," end quote. I wanted to digress for a moment to note that I would argue that women, goddess, and muses do not require any man to notice or record the reality or to have experience of them. However, despite Ginsberg's provocative verbiage designed to inflame the reader, in this poem he is, by Graves' definition, operating as a muse poet. Ginsberg interacts with the mother as he mourns his mother. I would pair Kaddish with Graves of Valentine, since both contain multiple women: a woman who remains voiceless as subject, a real woman, and an imagined woman, all who are constructed through the poet's gaze. In A Valentine's, Graves' speaker, a hunter-turned-husband, fantasizes about other women while with his love. The speaker states, "The phantom kills, he meditates, let me embrace, embracing you, beauty of other shape in you." Line 436. Thus, the speaker projects his erotic fantasies onto his lover's body. Though the fantasy is little more than candles to her flame, in his heart he has sinned. The speaker ends with, "Yielding your comprehensive pride, a homage even to suicide," line 13 and 14. The speaker's act of betrayal sits like a suicide note which can never be unwritten. This wording implies that though shallow and fleeting, fantasy is a self-murder. Fantasy is love and pride's suicide. Though these two poems are not exactly congruent, they show that Graves and Ginsberg realize that the real and the ideal cannot be separated, and they cannot be completely connected either. Similarly, Graves' Haunted posits memory and mental realities that depose and replace real individuals around him. These 3 poems are linked through the balances of seeing and showing. In all 3 poems, the eyes concurrently see and show, and what the mind experiences through the eyes is reality. However, in A Valentine, the speaker seems to note that the eyes can tell lies, keep secrets, and commit murder. This very cursory explication of these poems carried out here reveal that Ginsberg and Graves are looking at similar phenomena and are observing the world in similar ways. I would offer lists of poems to be paired together in a longer work: Gregory Corso's The American Way with Graves' The Kiss for the conception of time and loss. I would suggest Diane de Prima's Song for Baby O Unborn with Graves' The Cupboard or Leda for the conception of women and the expectations surrounding pregnancy. I would pair Diane Warkowski's Picture of a Girl Drawn in Black and White with Graves' Young Witch or The God Called Poetry to explore mythical and mythic tropes utilized by each. However, my time is fleeting, and I wanted to end with a work that combines Graves' romanticism with beat ideology and mystery, Michael McClure's The Mystery of the Hunt. Graves was aware, quote, that the poet's task was not to reverberate trite certainties, but to question the simple fact of being, which is a mystery to be unveiled in the novelty of the present moment through words, rhythm, and images. Rather than summing up what is already known, the poet goes in search of the new embodiment of life in the present moment, end quote. McClure knew this. McClure writes, "It's the mystery of the hunt that intrigues me, that drives us like lemons, but cautiously. The search for a bright square cloud, the scent of lemon verbena, or to learn rules for the game the sea otters play in the surf. It is these small things and the secret behind them that feel the heart, the pattern, the spirit, the fiery demon that link them together and pull their freedom into our senses, the smell of a shrub, a cloud, the action of animals, the rising, the exuberance when the mystery is unveiled. It is these small things that when brought into vision become an inferno." McClure expresses imagism that is much more than words. It is a paradise created by the poet that defies normal sensuality and dares us to free our senses. Robert Graves and the Beats unveiled the mystery of the world around them in words, rhythm, and images, and to this day and beyond, their works challenge those who read them. Further study connecting the Beats and Robert Graves would bear interesting fruit. For example, comparing Graves' male perspective femininity with the embodied self-awareness of the female Beats would absolutely prove edifying for the study of both. I hope that you would agree that Robert Graves and the Beats were poets of unrest and were not so different after all. Thank you.